Nice. So welcome to Crafting a Conference Proposal with the Society of Georgia Archivists Program Committee. Uh, so today we are going to go over the different session formats. So the ones that are new to this conference, the 2025 conference, and then a few that have been in works, have been used as formats for past sessions, past sessions and conferences, but still being used for this conference. We're then going to go over the requirements for a proposal and then what looks like a successful proposal based on past submitted proposals. These are from um, program committee members. So we did not take proposals from people who did not agree to let us use them. So don't worry about that. But they are being shared anonymously. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but we will have time for a Q&A after the hopefully brief presentation. So session formats. We have a lot of options for you this year to choose when submitting your proposal. So when you're thinking about the project, resource, demonstration, case study, whatever it is you're thinking about presenting on, you have options on how to make that work. So those are mini workshops, working group slash interest group, panel, a traditional panel, skills lab, tutorial or case study, and then lightning talks and poster sessions. The first we're going to talk about is the 50-minute mini workshop. So a mini workshop is on topics of interest that includes concrete practical tools and lessons for a smaller group of attendees. So if you've done workshops in past, like you've instructed people on how to use a certain archive space, not archive space, archive software like archive space, and you're thinking, oh, this would benefit other archivists to know, we want you to make a 50-minute workshop about it and share it with SGA members and other attendees. If you've done a project on disaster planning, like if your organization has developed a disaster plan and you think it works really well and you want to teach other people on how to make a disaster plan, that's great. We want to hear it. If you've been going through career development and you've learned a lot about networking or negotiating, that's a great workshop to do. We'd love to hear it. So things like that. So within our topics, or within the topics of any conference, like if you think there's a mini workshop that works, then great. Because we have offered a variety of topics for you to consider, but those aren't just the topics we're looking for, but consider workshops in the avenue of access, outreach, and instruction. For instruction, you can consider like you found a new hands-on activity and you think other instruction archivists or those who teach with archives would benefit a lot from using this activity, you can do a workshop in which people go through actually doing that activity. So this is like that format for doing those kind of things. We want hands-on workshops, things that really get people involved. And it's different from the traditional lecture of a panel presentation. So consider that in terms of the various topics that we offer in the call for proposals. And then next is the 50-minute working group. We have two different groups, working group and interest group. For working groups, a facilitator, so just one person, and up to 5 to 7 discussants grapple with a considered concern. So a facilitator is actually putting the proposal together. You do not have to have your group of people you want to work with already like together and discussing things before you submit the proposal. Working groups are meant to create a purpose, that identify a issue or topic in archives they want to discuss and have like a small group talk about it. And so after the proposal is accepted is when you find people to join your group. This would be at the conference, is basically a time for you to work together to grapple with this topic, idea, the project, and then others can attend to listen and maybe share comments or ideas depending on how you put your working group together. We've seen this at other conferences like National Council of Public History. If you want to go see ideas for working groups, I highly recommend looking up their various working groups from the past few years. That's the National Council for Public History. They've had working groups on decolonizing 250th anniversary of America, of the United States of America, working groups on Indigenous archives, community archives, um, labor unions, like archivist labor, that kind of thing. So this is really for these broad but specific topics in archives that we don't want to do in a silo. We want to discuss with other people at other institutions, and we're giving people space at the conference in order to do that. So, but allowing for others to attend and listen from those doing the working group. It's one of our basically networking opportunities that we're offering at the conference. So these have a different section in the proposal. So when you're in the submission form, you choose the type of format you want, and it directs you to how to fill out the application. So we'll get into the requirements here in a moment, but I just wanted to bring that up in case you're like, I don't want to fill out everything for a regular session format when I want to do a working group. This has different requirements. Same with an interest group. Interest groups are more for you to determine a topic of interest and have a structured discussion forum. So it's one person moderating the discussion and then attendees talking amongst themselves. The moderator can choose to have people break out into groups or have stay together as a whole session, all attendees together. That's really up to you and how you decide to structure the interest group. You can have more than one moderator if you see that that's necessary for the topic you want to do, but different from a working group. It's really to have audience participation. So if you're thinking of something that needs breakout groups, that needs a lot of like facilitated discussion, I highly recommend you submit for an interest group. So say you want to talk about career advancement and salary negotiation and all that, that can be an interest group. You want to talk about changing how we do finding aids or something like that. That's a great interest group. Anything along the lines of let's talk about our workflows. Let's talk about how we do documentation. If you just have this, you just want to talk to others, get a feel for how the rest of SGA is like doing certain things, interest groups are a great way to do that. And again, it's a separate part of the submission form. And then we have the 25-minute skill lab, tutorial / demonstration, or case study. So this is just 25 minutes, so it's half of the 50-minute. It is for 1 to 3 presenters to show attendees how to use or apply a specific tool, technique, workflow, or concept. We highly recommend visual aids and our handouts for this. So if you want to talk to people about why documentation is so important, you can do a little skill lab on how to create documentation. I saw one with the use of Legos. I actually did it, and I did learn the importance of documentation and why it's necessary for archives. If you want to do one on conservation or preservation, like a brief one on how to preserve a photograph or how to preserve a map, something like that. Something that beginners or intermediate people would love to hear. I highly recommend a skill lab or a demonstration. If there's another technology that doesn't really take up 50 minutes to discuss, it's just like a brief, like, let me show you how to do this specific thing in archive software, then great, do a 25-minute skill lab, especially if it's something that's open source and accessible to majority of archivists. Then we love to see that, because that way people can access it later, or even do it while you're like showing them how to use the tool. So if you're not sure, like if the tool or software or technique you're thinking of makes sense for this, feel free to reach out. We're happy to discuss it. We're happy to discuss any of these different session formats and how your project or demonstration, whatever you want to do, may fit with one of these. And then we have the traditional 50-minute panel. I'm pretty sure most of you have gone to these types of presentations. This is where it's more formal presentation. We recommend 2 to 5 presenters, no more. 1 presenter is fine. We don't recommend that it be one person presenting on the same, on their project, the whole 50-minute. If you have someone who's done a similar project at another institution and you want to work together on the panel, that's great. We highly recommend it, because this is supposed to be formal presentations around a single theme. So if you all have been working on digitization and making it work for small archives, great, 50-minute panel. Make sure that you consider that this 50 minutes includes Q&A. So if you have more presenters, it means it takes up more of the time, and you'll have less time for Q&A, or you'll have less time for presentation, that kind of thing. So that's why we don't recommend more than 5 presenters, because then it's not meaningful for the attendees. We're hoping that attendees go away from any type of these sessions with something they can use at their institution or in their career. So you've all seen various traditional panels in the past, but I highly recommend you check out some of the ones we have available on YouTube, the SGA's YouTube channel. But this is really if you think your project or whatever you want to do a presentation on is more traditional, and you rather give it, what I'm doing right now. If you rather do this, then I highly recommend doing a 50-minute panel. This can be one of the ways that if you're not sure, it's great option, but we highly recommend you consider the other options as well, because those are great for people who want to like teach people new skills. 50-minute panel is not really for that. And then we have the 7-minute lightning talks. This is for 1 to 2 presenters max. You only have 7 minutes. More than 2 presenters, you really can't get what you're talking about out there, right? Switching over between people will take too much time usually. This does not include Q&A. We usually group all lightning talks together either in one session or multiple sessions, so that way there's Q&A at the end after everyone goes for the lightning talks. But this is to briefly highlight recent projects, works in progress, or ideas for future collaboration. So if you have a project that you're working on and you want to share about how it's going, this is great for that. If you're not sure, if you're new to conferences and you just, you want to get presentation under your belt and you think your project is a great thing to present on, we happily want you to present a 7-minute lightning talk. We want to hear from our members. That's what makes these programs so great. We want to hear the work that's going on, and 7-minute lightning talks are great for that. We would usually group these based on the topics that they are on, but it depends on how many lightning talks are submitted and how many we accept. And then poster sessions. I highly recommend these for anyone new to the field, anyone doing a project who wants to like showcase their work, that kind of thing. This is great for highlighting data-driven projects, because you have this large poster format and people can take their time in reading it. You don't have to go through it in 50 minutes, because we'll have these set up in a separate space so people can go through, look at them, come back to them, take photos, that kind of thing. So this is great for highlighting what's really data driven in our field, the research people are doing, things grad students are doing. If you're aware of grad students doing great work in the field, we want them to submit poster sessions. We want our early career archivists, any archivist at any stage really can submit a poster session, especially if you are not comfortable talking in front of people. Public speaking not your thing, but you have a great project, please consider a poster session. We highly encourage it. We want to have as many great posters as we can. And we want to highlight all the work in any format you guys choose to present in. But if we do go through your proposals, we may come back and suggest a different format, just depending on the project and what we think works best for it. So please be aware of that. You may submit a poster session. We may be like, can we have a mini workshop? Because it's something that would work better in that format. You do not have to say yes to us for that. We will just be suggesting it as a better avenue for the project, demonstration, whatever you're doing. And then proposal requirements. I think I'll stop here because I know I went through a lot, and I want to make sure there's no questions or comments. Thank you, Kathy, for putting all those links in the chat. I'll give you guys a few seconds. Okay, so we're gonna move. Thank you, Katie. We're gonna move to proposal requirements. We're gonna go over the ones that are new, plus how we see you should be responding to things like abstract and learning objectives based on like past proposals and past conferences. Such things as title and your name, we won't be going through it. So we won't be going through every aspect of the submission form. So the abstract. I want to remind everyone that there's a 1,500 character limit. Length is not as great as quality, so it's quality over quantity, right? When you are crafting your abstract, think about your plan session. We want you to tell us about it based on your chosen format. So how does it fit within that format, right? Why should people know about this project, resource tool, etc.? How will it benefit attendees when they're attending the session? What do you think they'll get out of it? And how relevant is the proposed session for archives and archivists? Is this something that really applies to a majority or a good portion of the archives field, especially here in Georgia, right? And how does your proposed session relate to SGA's core values of community, leadership, diversity, lifelong learning, and sustainability, right? If you go to the SGA website, we have our core values. We follow SAA's code of ethics. Like, we are a professional organization and we want our conferences to reflect these values, right? The sessions that we give out and that are part of the annual meeting. So consider that when you're crafting your abstract. You really want to answer the questions of who, what, when, where, why, and so what, right? When you're writing a paper, similar thing. So that leads us into learning objectives. Again, 1,500 character limit. We want to see clearly defined learning objectives. In your learning objectives, based on the format that you've chosen, you need to identify the primary learning objectives, are the learning methodology approach, are actionable takeaways for attendees. So this depends on the format you've chosen. If you've chosen a traditional panel, you probably don't have a necessarily like actionable takeaways or like tools that they're getting out of it. Well, you should, but it really depends on the format. Like, a demonstration will be different from a working group or an interest group, which working group and interest groups have goals and don't have learning objectives. So this does not apply to them, and we'll get to that. requirement when we sorry, teams. We'll get to that requirement here in a second. But consider like how are you teaching people? Why does that matter? What are the proposed outcomes of this session? Are they clear, measurable, and achievable? So you're going to consider the methodology, the objectives, the actual takeaway. Will attendees be leaving with a set of resources that they can use at their own institution? Will they be leaving knowing about a project and how it can be applied to their type of institution? Remember, we're not all the same. We're not all academic, corporate, public, state, federal archives. We are very different in how we function. But when we are creating these presentations, these sessions, we need to think how they apply to those outside of us as well. And you need to consider that with your learning objectives. And then so working groups and interest groups have goals rather than learning objectives, because it's more of these are more discussion, right? So what are the main goals of this group? What are your planned actionable takeaways for the group? And how will attendees benefit from attending this group session? So if it's a interest group on career development, will there be talks about salary negotiations, hiring and retention, how to do interviews, resume review? Like, will they be told like resources, that kind of thing? Or is the goal to more or less discuss how archivists can work together to make a more standard career development plans, help with advancement overall as a group? Like, is that the goal of this working group or interest group? So it's clear, it's defined by the topic that you choose, right? And then from there, we want you thinking about what goals you as a facilitator or moderator have for the group. There is an abstract portion for interest group and working groups. So remember that each also have 1,500 character limits. So be considerate of that when you're writing those out. It will stop you. So be considerate of the character limit and the fact that you have both abstract and goals. So what makes sense in both, but the abstract for working group, interest group is similar, like requirements. This is what we're looking for as the other format. So this abstract applies, what we're looking for applies to both formats, like both kinds of formats. So working group, interest group, and then all other formats. Sorry if that doesn't make sense. And then for all sessions, we want you to identify major topics and themes. We are hoping that our sessions cover a broad range of topics that archivists are interested in. When we do surveys, we get the gambit of topics in the archival field. So we've identified a lot of them to choose from for the topics and themes. So it's a checklist in the submission form, and you just check which ones apply. I recommend only checking 2 to 3, no more than that, because it shouldn't cover all topics and themes within the archival field. So what ones are highlighted in your sessions and what can attendees expect to learn more about? So if it's a mini workshop on preservation, choose preservation. If it's a discussion, a working group on donor relations, choose donor relations. That it's really that simple. We just want you to consider what are the major topics your session's looking at, because when we craft our program, we will be identifying those in the program so people can choose their sessions based on that. We will also be identifying in the program what level, experience level audience should have when attending this session. Like, who is this session actually for? Is it for beginners, intermediates, or advanced? When you're thinking about beginners, it's about students and early career archivists, but also for those new to the topic and need no previous knowledge in order to attend this session. So that's generally our students and early career archivists will probably not have that knowledge. But also there's those of us who focus a lot on maybe instruction, processing, but they want to attend an instruction session to get to understand that. Is this an instruction session that's for a beginner or someone more advanced? So consider that when you are selecting one of those. And then we will add that into the program when we do it. If we're not certain what you chose works for your session when we're after all the proposals have been accepted and we go into the crafting the actual program, we will let you know and ask that work with you to see if there's a better like experience level for it. But it really just depends on the topic and what you're covering. If it's intermediate, we're considering the mid-career archivists. But it's also for sessions that require attendees to have some knowledge of the topic, right? So if we're getting into foreign digital preservation, but we're talking about choosing a content management system, people are probably going to need to know something about foreign digital archives, like in all the digital archives aspects, right? So that way you can get a little more in depth with the presentation. We're hoping this requires less of you to do a whole background and intro into the actual topic itself and lets you get a little more into it, especially with the advanced level. This is more experienced archivists, also for sessions that go in depth on the topic and for sessions that cover upper level career advancement and work. So if you're talking about higher administration at academic archives, that's a more that's an advanced session, right? But some people might attend it if they're considering that work, right? But they need to know that some topics won't be covered because this is going more in depth into the topic. So consider that when you're selecting these. We're hoping to get a few sessions for each. So we have opportunities for everyone at different stages in their careers. So if you don't think you don't think you have the audience for advanced, please talk to us because we think if we offer that, we should be able to get people, right? Um, and we want to be able to offer those for those people who come to the conference. And then successful proposal examples. So we're going to give examples of abstracts and learning objectives, so not the whole proposal, just aspects of the proposals. So the first example of an abstract is on the screen. This one was about digitization work at an academic nonprofit. You can see the name there. So this was brief, but to the point. Again, this was recorded. So I'm going to give you a minute or so to read over it so you can see, but you should be able to go to our YouTube channel to see these examples as well. Again, you want to make sure you are telling us why and what you will be doing in this session, right? And how it will benefit others. I'm going to move to the next example. Example 2 is on a different topic. This is on donor relations. I'm going to give you a few minutes to read over it. Okay, now let's move on to learning objectives. So this is the first example of learning objectives. Again, these seem to be actionable, something that they can apply later on. We want them leaving this conference with something to remember. So what will be the legacy of your presentation in a sense? And this is from the same proposal as the first abstract, so they go together. And I'm going to move on to the next example, which it goes with the second example abstract. So if you're giving them resources, mention that. If you are leaving them with tips and tricks, mention that kind of thing. So next up is questions. So I'm going to pause the recording here in a second. Feel free to return to this on our YouTube channel and use it when you're crafting your proposals. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to unmute, put them in the chat. You can feel free to share your